Hey everybody, I'm Joe Killinger. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur, and we put these videos together every week to give you all the tips and insights from my experience over the last several years. So make sure you tune in and subscribe, and thank you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Today I want to talk to you about short sales. I honestly don't know a ton about short sales. I know that George does. Many of you would remember George from previous videos. George is the CEO of Commercial Brokers International in Los Angeles. He's a great resource for me, and he's very close, so that always helps. George, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me over again.
I had somebody reach out and ask about short sales. I think as an investor, are you seeing many right now, first of all?
Not yet. I mean, there are a couple that we've seen come up a little bit more than obviously we have over the last 6-7 years. The real last big one that we saw was after the last, back in 2008, 2009, through those times. But since then, we've been seeing properties for the most part go up in value, so you haven't seen too many short sales.
Okay, do you think that's something we're probably going to see more of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, especially certain sectors.
Yeah. I want to take it from the seller side and the buyer side. I guess let's start with the seller. And so you've bought a property, you got yourself in a situation where upside down. You just call your bank and say, hey, I want to renegotiate my loan, the terms of the loan.
There's a couple of things that you can do initially, and the first thing, and typically the people that find themselves in a short sale situation, especially on commercial properties, what they have to remember is that most commercial loans are not fully amortizing. Right. They come due in 10 years, so you really pay only about a third to a little bit over a third of the actual loan amount off. So if you actually purchase a property and something happens and the value goes down quite a bit, or you over leverage, you get aggressive in the financing, and it may not be possible for you to refinance it, or you have to sell it. This can happen in several ways. Most likely, in this scenario right now where we're in, is a lot of retailers, they're going to have to lower rents, adjust rental rates, and that affects the value of a property when it comes time to either refinance or to sell, because everything's based upon the net operating income and and cap rates. So when you lower the rental rates, it affects the value of the property, and if you go to, and you may be in a situation where you have to sell, but you actually end up netting less than what the loan amount is, which is a short sale. So in those situations, a couple things. First and foremost, the seller should be looking to see if they actually have to sell. If they don't, and if they can perhaps hold on or restructure the loan or talk to the lender and see if there's any way to negotiate something with the loan, whether it's a blend and extend, perhaps maybe get a forbearance on a few months, or there's different tactics that they can utilize to be put in a better financial situation.
Yeah, maybe don't make payments for a few months, maybe add it to the end of the loan. There's a lot of options you can take a look at before you just give up.
Absolutely. But at the same time, if for some reason, maybe it's an outside reason that you have to sell and you're in that situation, the first thing to remember is that you really need to start looking and talking to your lender ahead of time. It's all about communication with anything in life, but especially in this situation, because the last thing you want to do is go into contract and try and sell it, and then the lender says, we're not going to allow a short sale, because it's really up to them.
And now I've got a question. So I've got $1 million loan on a property.
Yes.
I'm going to now be able to sell it for $750,000. How do I do that?
Well, again, part of it's going to be the negotiation, and when you end up selling it, a couple things that you need to realize is that the lender may or may not approve that short sale, and when they may even ask you to come in out of pocket for some additional money to cover the difference. Generally not, though. They'll do their own analysis on the property. They'll do their own appraised value, determine what's best in their best interest, and they'll work out something typically with most owners or sellers
If
of the
they can,
properties,
they will,
if they
yeah.
can. What you have to remember, though, is that your other third-party people, they need to be aware of this as well, because you don't want to be put in a situation where a buyer may try and go after you for specific performance and to force the sale, because they were never notified that it's a short sale subject to lender approval. And if the lender hasn't approved it, they can try and force the sale. The lender can also come back and try and take away commissions from the brokers, or reduce their commissions.
Right.
So the brokers all need to be aware of that as well, and your agreements that you have when you go to sell the property need to reflect something along those lines as well. Lastly, the one thing you really need to do and communicate with is your accountant. Make sure you talk to your accountant ahead of time, because what most people forget is that in a short sale situation, there actually may be
Tax implications
taxable
because of the balance
income.
between the million and the
Exactly.
750.
So typically speaking, the IRS looks at let's say that you have that $1 million loan and you sell it for $750,000. IRS is going to look at that loan, that $250,000 loan forgiveness,
Taxable.
as income.
Yeah.
So you have to pay taxes on top of that. So you have to be fully aware of what you're getting yourself into, because if you're not prepared for it, a year later, you could be hit with a big surprise and be in just as bad of a position as you were prior to selling the property.
So make sure you talk to your banker and your CPA. Very critical. Anything else on the seller side?
Not really. The main thing is that you really want to also price the property right, so that you are going to be able to sell it quickly, because the longer you wait in a down market, the lower the price goes. But also the pricing will stand up to scrutiny from the lender side as far as when they go to determine whether or not to approve the short sale.
Okay.
So you don't want to just fire sell it and get it off, but at the same time, you don't want to put it in a position where you are overpriced and it doesn't sell, because that doesn't help anybody or
Sure.
you
It just sits
especially.
there.
So make sure you get the right advice from a brokerage company that can tell you the current market conditions and what to do.
Okay. All right, now from the buyer side, what should I be aware of? If I'm out and I want to go start buying short sale properties, what should I be aware of?
Well, again, be aware that it may not be 100% guaranteed, in the
Right.
sense that the lender can come back for various things. They can come back and say, we want, typically speaking, your purchase and sale agreement should be subject to a lender approval, and the lender may not approve the short sale, in which case they can come back and say, we're not going to give you the sale at $750, but we'll give it to you at $850. So you as the buyer have to determine whether or not, and it's now a negotiation. It doesn't mean that the seller has to pay for it, doesn't mean the buyer has to pay for it. It's open to negotiation. So you have to now figure out, well, how do we do this? In addition to that, if you have a buyer's broker, that buyer's broker in a short sale situation will probably have you sign an agreement guaranteeing their commission.
Yeah, 'cause they're going to do all
So,
this work.
which is fair. I mean,
Sure.
if they're doing all the work
They're
for
going to
you,
go find it.
they're the ones finding it. You're doing very well with it. Everybody, they want to make sure that they get paid, and if the lender takes their commission out of it, you might be liable for it. So you have to be fully aware of everything going on, and throughout, and build your time frames. The other thing you might want to do when you're structuring your purchase and sale agreement is that a lot of the due diligence that may cost money, such as environmental reports, surveys, things like that, the time doesn't start clicking until the seller, or rather the lender,
Yeah.
gives the approval for the short sale.
Okay. You got me thinking about real estate agents, and if I'm an investor, how do I find short sales? Just start calling them. You can't really call on the banks because they're not going to give the information.
Banks aren't going to give the information, but typically
It's going to be through a broker probably.
through a broker usually.
To get the most
brokers can pull a lot of information when it comes to through the title companies, as far as what kind of loans outstanding, what might be a high loan amount for the area. They have rough ideas for it, and then they can start delving down into the analysis of it. Another option is potentially to
Pull
track
NODs.
NODs,
Yeah.
notices of defaults.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, those in a notice of default situation, a lot of times those owners of properties might be a little bit more motivated to sell it, and it may be under underwater, which is why they haven't sold it in the first place. So they may not be fully aware that they can actually do a short sale, and they're holding it on, keeping their putting their personal money into it, trying to keep it afloat and alive, when in reality it might be better for them just to sell it. So definitely keep track of that, because the whole idea is that you structure a transaction where everybody walks away a winner. The bank gets some of their money back, maybe not 100% of it, but it's not a bloodbath, so to speak. The seller gets to walk away from the property without potentially ruining their credit, and then the buyer hopefully gets a little bit better of a deal for having to deal with the headache and the intricacies of structuring this transaction.
Okay. That was great information. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. If anybody has any further questions, you can reach out to me directly. You can DM me, or you can reach out to George. I'm going to put his information in the video down below. And always, if you haven't done so yet, please do subscribe. And thank you for coming in today, George.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you, everybody.